Welcome everybody to the Home Services Summit webinar series. It's always great to see you all on here, even if it's somewhat virtual. And it's great to have Sherry on our show today. I'm looking forward to this interview. As you all know, this session is going to be all about home services and how to run home service companies and learning from each other. I'll do the first 45 minutes or so and lead those questions, which the conversation I'm looking forward to. And then at any point in time on the chat, you'll notice on the bottom right, you can hit that and load any questions you've got in for either Sherry or myself, and we'll make sure we get to those in the latter part of our exchange. So my name is Scott Abbott, CEO of 5-Star Franchising, one of the founders of 5-Star Painting, and been in the business of home service franchising now for about 19 years. And Sherry, who has got a lot of experience in franchising, and we just talked backstage about all the things she's been involved with. I'm just going to give you her bio so you can hear about some of it, and then we'll dive into some of the questions. So Sherry is the Chief Executive Officer of Stellar Brands, an umbrella company that has Restoration One, Blue Frog Plumbing and Drain, and Soft Rock, so 3 home service brands. And her focus is to provide exemplary services and outstanding results for Stellar with continued growth for long-term success and new opportunities. So some background. During Sherry's time as Chief Operating Officer of Stellar Brands from 2020 to 2022, her expertise in operations, strategy development, and customer experience helped the company rapidly expand to more than 480 locations. That's incredible. Awarded across the U.S. today combined. Today, Restoration One has become one of the fastest growing brands in the $210 billion property restoration industry, earning all kinds of accolades. Prior to joining Stellar Brands, Sherry worked for ServiceMaster, a $1 billion global business consisting of company-owned locations and franchised multi-unit organizations. For 15 years, she served in various leadership roles, including at Terminex, ServiceMaster Restore, and Mary Maid. So lots of great experience to pull from. And she graduated from Wheaton College with a bachelor's degree in psychology, which is exactly what you should do if you want to get involved in home services. You need to understand people, right? Sherry,
All of it.
My son is just an aside. My son is an aspiring therapist, and so he's going to school doing psychology and all that stuff. And I hear from time to time the stuff he's learning, and I think that is something that everyone in franchising should spend some time on.
Relevant.
Yeah, we all are kind of part therapists in this business. So, so Sherry, from your own words, love to just hear, if you wouldn't mind, give us the story. How did you get in the business of franchising, and now your role at Stellar Brands?
Oh, well, so fun to be here. So great to meet you, Scott, and to spend some time talking about home services, which is it's the best place to work, I think, the best segment to work in. And I've been in a couple of segments, and I still love this one the best. And it's, when you look back on your career and people ask you, how'd you get to where you are? You kind of look back and you're like, well, it was kind of a windy road. And I can't say that I sat in that college, Wheaton College, gazing out at the window, envisioning myself, doing what I'm doing. As I said to you backstage, as I grew up in my small town, I didn't know anybody that worked in corporate. Like, I didn't even know what that was. We were a small town. I grew up in a family business. My dad was a welder and steel fabricator, which means you bend and cut steel. And then my mom ran the office. And that's what I knew. I mean, I knew blue collar. I knew tradesmen. Our shop was down the hill from our house. So work and life was very connected. And so when I went to college, I thought I was going to be a teacher, which was there were lots of teachers in my family. And so it's been this road of discovery, but a lot of mentors and people along the way seeing things in me that I didn't even call out in myself. So I got here by first spending 13 years at Jenny Craig. I literally was hired the day they opened the Boston market. So it was at the beginning of the company.
Wow.
Spent 8 years out in the field and then went for the first time to the corporate office in San Diego. And again, mentors, right? Like a company that was growing so quickly, you get tapped on the shoulder and they say, well, we need you to do this over here. And, I would look at it and be like, well, I can't do that. And they'd be, oh, no, you can. And they would, throw you in. And that's sort of how I continued to progress. Spent the back part of that time in a corporate office for the first time. And then when I left through my network, my name was passed. And the next thing I knew, my husband and I were driving from Massachusetts to Memphis, Tennessee with two little boys, a U-Haul full of toys. And I was heading to Service Master to
Mhm.
be the chief marketing officer for Merry Maids. And that kicked off 16 years of just an incredible career, education in franchising it, and also touching back to branch and company owned.
Mhm.
So and then, and then this opportunity. So it's been a rolling evolution, with great opportunities, but also very generous people around me that have seen things that I didn't see, and really open doors that you just need to kind of jump and take the risk and try.
Yeah.
And it's been really fun.
Oh, I love it. And so I want to just pick away at something that you mentioned, because when you talked about being the CMO of Merry Maids, I got to believe there's all kinds of nuggets that you could share with us about how a business that really revolves around recurring services, contractual nature, and attracting, your one-time clean fee, your monthly clean fee, all adds up, and at some point, it's the cost of acquisition and what you're making finally breaks even, and you make money on a customer, right? And so I wonder, just if you wouldn't mind just talking to us a little bit about, you know, home services and in recurring services. How did you guys think about acquiring a customer? And like, what did you see as being some of the best ways of doing that in terms of bringing your cost of acquisition down?
Interestingly, my time at Merry Maids actually at Jenny Craig at the very end, I was put into the marketing department. And at the time and at the stage at Jenny Craig, there was a lot of work we were doing with some really key vendors on understanding our customer base
Yeah.
and the power of segmentation,
Mm-hmm.
and understanding your ROI based on different segments within your database, because it's the power of the reoccurring revenue.
Yeah.
And understanding in that world, it wasn't much different than Merry Maids. A one-time visit can cost you a lot to get that person in the door, and
Yeah.
you're actually negative.
Mm-hmm.
And so the longer the reoccurring nature of the transaction, the more return you start to pay back your acquisition cost.
Yeah.
And so when I jumped from a brand where you can see all the customers, you own all the customers, and went to Merry Maids, it was the challenge of realizing the customer bases were owned, if you will, or they were the franchisees' customer bases.
Yep.
They're not brought up at the corporate level where you're manipulating. These are local businesses, right? So it was bringing the discipline to bear that said not every customer is the same,
Yeah.
and doing some work with some franchisees that were very generous in sharing their databases with us to understand the dynamics of a one-time clean versus a weekly or a biweekly clean, and the proportion of that in your base.
Mm-hmm.
So if your base had too much of one time, the reoccurring base didn't generate the profit that you needed to. And so we started to educate people on segments. And instead of just providing them with marketing resources, just kind of, generalized marketing resources, we
Yeah.
were very specific in kind of a one-time clean, and started to really educate the network on not relying on one-time cleans in their mix. And at the same time, we actually looked at the sales process and the sales scripting. And we did work with franchisees to really emphasize the weekly and biweekly frequency,
Yeah.
so that they would, even just a 0.5% change or a 1% change would make a huge difference long term. So thinking about the base in segments, all customers are actually not the same.
Yeah.
And then helping people navigate that, it started to open up other projects. I mean, now you start talking about pricing. Now you
Hmm.
start talking about discounting. Now you start talking about staff incentives, and you really do realign things according to the segmentation of your base.
Um, Digging in further on that, I got to believe that over 16 years of being involved, and not just in Mary Mae's, but at all the brands you've been involved in, there's been I would imagine, a pretty big shift of consumers from searching yellow pages and so forth to online, and now maybe to other services like Service Master or Marketplace Partners and so forth. How do you think about um, that change that's happened, and do you see it getting easier for home service brands to acquire customers with how the world has evolved, or is it more complicated? Like, what are your views on how things have changed, and what we can learn from that?
I think they've gotten more complicated, and I think they change so quickly. That's part of the complication.
Uh-huh.
When I showed up at Service Master, it feels like now a million years ago, all the brands were highly reliant on yellow pages. There was a department of people that
Yeah.
managed yellow pages. We were one of the biggest advertisers in yellow pages across the brands. I mean, and over the 16 years, that went away. And, it's like the boiling of the frog analogy, like you, there's people don't, everyone doesn't just shift quickly. Everyone, if you have people in the organization that built the business based on, in that example, yellow pages, it's hard for them sometimes to see a changing environment. And this is a very dynamic and changing environment. And I think the customer has more and more choices in how they find what they need. So the question becomes today, I mean, how many places do you have to be in?
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's complicated, because all the different places aren't free. So you have to start placing bets
Uh-huh.
on where you want to be. And then you've got to be really smart about how much return there is. Otherwise, you put your bet on something that doesn't return a whole lot, and it's halfway through the year and you don't have a chance to pivot.
Yeah. Yeah, and the challenge really is, and I've seen this happen time and time again. When we say placing bets, the people placing those bets almost always are franchisees, right? I
Yes.
know we have an ad fund we can rely on to do some experiments, some tests, but at the end of the day, when we are telling a franchisee to place some money down on any category or channel, it's at our we're encouraging to do so, and we hope that they'll receive this kind of returns we've seen historically. But if they don't show up, you've spent this currency that you really have a limited resource of, which is the trust and confidence of a franchisee in the marketing team to deliver solid programs for them. And so, you can only make so many mistakes in this business before you kind of lose a franchisee. And so, I think that is true. It's gotten more complicated. I also got to believe, though, that even though it's gotten more complicated, it at least what I've seen, and I'd like to get your view on this. In some ways, it's a good thing because franchisors tend to be better resourced. We have the capacity to put highly talented people that are highly specialized on our teams and share them across, in your case, 450 units or more in many cases. And that expertise can be leveraged. Whereas who we compete against 80% of the time, 85% of the time, tends to be a local mom and pop shop who doesn't have the benefits of all that backing that franchising brings. And so my experience has been that we are able to get a little bit in front of the curve and get access to new techniques or methods or channels that maybe a mom and pop couldn't. I'd love to get your view on that, and maybe if you wouldn't mind sharing any experiences, or and from any your wealth of experience, it could come from restoration or plumbing, or maybe it's at Service Master. Any like big wins you've found, or any new things you've done at any of those brands that have really paid off, that you went and thought to yourself, wow, like that investment in that channel resulted in a surprising return that I just didn't expect.
Um, that's funny, because that question usually comes to us by a franchisee who says, just tell me where I should spend, right? Like,
Uh-huh.
you're just like, oh, okay, I'm
Yeah.
paralyzed now. Tell you where to spend. Um, I just want to just amplify this challenge of you're in a position. I do believe that we are, by the nature of the way we're organized, we do have an advantage to an individual local owner. I think no matter what, I think there's lots of advantages that come. Marketing is just one of them. And I think from our own expertise that we can hire, certainly from the vendors that we can interact with and the expertise that they can bring to bear, where they wouldn't be working with an individual owner,
Right.
they work in a bigger environment. I see huge value there. And then in the community. So, we all have a philosophy, and I have a philosophy that when you have a healthy franchise community, they pass information along, and that just dynamic gives you an
Mm.
advantage because in the group, in a group of 200 people, someone's got a talent, right? For marketing in this example. And they're out there trying things, doing things, learning things too.
Yeah.
And they can bring information to bear that you put that all together, you can then answer the question from the franchisee who says, I don't want to know all the details, just tell me where to put my money,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And you can point them to people that have made some wise decisions. To the question of, have I pulled the lever and all the pennies from heaven drop in leads? No, I wish I could find that lever. The latest thing we just put into place, though, that is, it's not necessarily, it's not a direct lead gen, but I think it's a influencer to lead generation, is we just put Bird Eye reputation management in place
Oh yeah.
across the network, literally just 2 months ago. And that's a step for us to amplify the customer's voice, because I
Yeah.
think when we can hear the customer, it tells us a lot of things. It tells us training things, it tells us operational things, but I think it also tells us marketing things. And that the way digital is moving, reputation impacts how you show up.
Oh yeah. That's
So I'm hoping that as we integrate this voice even more loudly in the network, so the local owner can see across different places where you can do reviews, they can see, hear, and respond to the customer sentiment. Um, I think that will lift all ships.
yeah. Yeah. It's a big topic. It's been on the minds of a lot of brands. Reputation management does have a big impact on even rankings and how well you're. Not only does it tell the customer you're doing good work, obviously, which is really important, but having more reviews means you rank higher.
Yeah.
I want to just go back to some comments you just shared there, because I think there's so much wisdom in here. It's worth unpacking a little bit for our audience. And I'll just preface this with a story I heard one time. It was like 10 years ago. And it was just during the recession, 2009, 2010, when, restaurants were just getting hammered. Any kind of high-end service restaurant was just getting hammered. And all like the less expensive restaurants, McDonald's and so forth, were doing better because their cost for a meal was a lot less there than, let's say, an Arby's or something like that. And in this period of time, Subway, which had thousands of locations, had comped same-store sales down everywhere except for this one franchisee in Florida who had come up with this $5 foot-long idea. All subs, no matter what sub you bought, was $5. The franchisee did it, came up with the idea, had a piece of like a cardboard he just kind of did himself, put up on his menu, and he was seeing a big increase in sales. So kudos to the franchisor that was watching. So I think the big takeaway is the duty and responsibility of the franchisor is to have the data to see where things are working, right? So if there are exceptions and they are in this top 10%, they're delivering amazing results. What are they doing that is working? And then how do you cross-pollinate that now across other franchisees? So, our duty, making sure you have field software technology that's pulling us up as fast as possible so that we can leverage it. And then the second thing is a culture. I'm going to speak to the more cultural element of this. To have a franchisor mentality at the corporate office, if you will, that believes, in fact, some of the best ideas come from franchisees. Some of the best ways to execute and manage a business will be discovered by the people who operate the business and won't necessarily be discovered in a boardroom with the team members of your company. And so what you just said there, I think was really important. It is you've built a culture that enables or empowers franchisees to talk to one another. So I'm going to spend some time on that for a minute, because this could be, some franchisors don't want franchisees talking, right? Because they don't always talk nicely about us. And then some franchisors really want to make that happen. And clearly, from what you're describing, that's the way you would lean. So I would love for you to talk about, how do you bring franchisees together? I know there's probably an annual convention you're doing. Are you doing things in between them? Are you doing town halls monthly, quarterly? How are you bringing franchisees together to talk about what's working to make sure that that's actually happening and get engagement within the network?
I love this topic so much. I can't even tell you. When I left Service Master, I was on, I consider it a sabbatical. I didn't, we graduated our youngest son, and I can remember my husband said, no sudden moves. Like, don't panic if you're not working, which, when you're a worker by nature, you panic. It's like, don't panic, no sudden moves. And whatever you do, if you're going to do something, choose something fun. And it really made me think about, what did I want to do? And so when this opportunity came, I had made a list, like a list person does. And, I evaluated the opportunity, and it was all fun because it was growing. And as much as Terminex was an amazing thing, I didn't want to kill anything. Like, I'm like all done killing things, even pests. I was like, enough of that. But this was so fun. I had to say yes. And part of my thinking as I decided to come back to franchising, because you have a decision to make when you've done both. Like, do I want to go to franchising, or do I want to? My decision to come back to franchising was going to be about having influence over the culture. Mm. And I was not going to get in a situation where I was fighting with franchisees. Life is too short, and I just don't enjoy that environment. And my hypotheses, which isn't a unique hypothesis, but my hypothesis is it's a much richer, progressive, messy environment, but it's worth it at the end. And I believe that because I grew up in a family business, and I often picture my dad in some of these franchise meetings, like back at Service Master. I would picture him sitting there. And he had this thing where, I don't know that I knew it as a kid, but as you grew up and you would talk about things, he just, and this is, you might have to bleep this out. So I was
warning. Oh, it's okay. We're live. No bleeping. Say whatever you'd like.
He would say, I have no time for bullshit.
Oh, bleeped it.
Bleep. Today, that's kind of PG, isn't it? Jeez.
Yeah, it's all right. It's 16.
But anyway, no time. And I often have thought that over the years, just sitting there watching, thinking, no time. These people are they're trying to make payroll. They're trying to pay their lease payment. They're trying to figure out how to get leads through. Like, they're solving real problems. Mm-hmm. And the last thing I want to be is the person that says, your brand standard, you need to, brand standards are important. All of that is important. But I believe, and the team I've assembled, we believe that if I make the guidelines clear, the rails clear, mm-hmm. everything inside, I don't have to sweat so hard. And to that point, I am better. There are places I have to lead as the franchisor. That's my job. I have to make sure the brand is going in the right direction. I need to make sure that we're leveraging everything to the best of its ability. And then I need to open up communication channels. And that's a constant challenge. And then I want to create environments where people help us solve problems. And so we do that, and we're doing it better and better. I don't want to make it sound like, wow, I landed here and this is just what we did. I think this is a process because you have to, chaos has to be low for this to work. Because if you're firefighting chaos, let's take COVID. COVID happens and blows every, normal business, just disrupts everything. That's a moment where you have to stop and adjust and do things differently. So I don't want to be, naive to that. But if I can create an environment that is stable, then I have time to listen. And so, we really are pushing more and more with, we're new to conventions. Like these are young companies. How do I take even more time where peers are interacting? Because that's when you do a survey after convention, that's what they rate the highest. It's the time with peers.
Every time.
So I need to bring training. I need to bring vendors. I need to do all the stuff, but I can't make time with peers the tiniest part on the agenda. We launched an FBR survey for the first time last year. This will be our second one coming out to listen. We have peer groups that we've launched. It's rated one of the highest things that we've done. And I actually chose, with the leader of Restoration One, we actually chose to go out and bring an outside vendor in to do this so that these peer groups, they could talk about things that I may not be free to talk about with them as a franchisor. Because they have to get into their financials, which means they got to be talking to each other about, do I hire? Do I let people go? Like these are hard decisions.
Do you have anyone from your corporate team attend those peer groups?
Yes. So we do have a FC that will attend and sit quietly, again, because I have responsibility as a brand.
Well, I think it's it's frankly, I think it's a fantastic way to make sure that every team member hears what's really going on. Even if they're just sitting there silent, they're not moderating, to be in a position where they can hear about the wins or the losses, and then to take that back to their jobs is, in my view, so valuable. So I'm really excited to hear that. That's awesome.
We've had, again, if anybody, these are works in progress. I never want to present something that it's totally, it's done and in the bag here, but we've had a few runs on subcommittees and, we've got a couple good ones going on right now where we're dealing with two hot topics. One is technology.
Yeah.
Because I can't make technology decisions without the franchisees buy-in. That's a fight. And honestly, I don't have to live with it like they do. And then national accounts, how do we manage or how do we think about a national account program when the franchisor is going to have more control? So those are two hot areas right now where, we've had it, we had them started and then they kind of didn't work and then we kind of put them down and now we've picked them back up because we're trying to find and formulate where and how this all makes sense and where to do it formally, but also your Subway example, informally. And I think informally is the good old fashioned field visits. I think you have to get out.
So obviously team members are doing that, especially FCs, right? Are definitely doing that. Do you do that yourself as well? Do you go visit franchisees from time to time? And how do you think about that? Is it a scheduled thing? Is it random? Is it ad hoc?
I do visit franchisees. In fact, I was just, my husband and I we're from Massachusetts. And so we went up for the 4th of July, which is one of the best times to be in Massachusetts. And our franchisee was opening their Cape Cod location, and we were 17 miles away. And I went to their ribbon cutting. And it was the best day. So I will, that was me alone. And that was just supporting this wonderful family and their opening. And, we had some other franchisees that made the trip to come and celebrate with them. So I'll do that. Often I'm traveling with the leader of the brand.
Hmm.
And I do that. We just did a round trip up through Colorado and hit maybe 5 franchises. So I do it as often as I can.
That's great.
To me, I always describe it. It's like as soon as you get on the road, you're like breathing oxygen again. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm like breathing oxygen. And it just reminds you about how powerful um, just small business is and what an honor it is to be in this.
You're giving such a great reminder to me. Taking notes for my own business at this point, of how important it is to listen.
Mhm.
In it's every business runs this way. We can get so busy in the minutia of what we're doing and the rocks, and we call them rocks, or big priorities that we all have. But at the end of the day, uh, we do franchise business reviews. We now are doing them semi-annually as well to hear more of the voice of our franchisees. And we do an annual event where I see them all. We're going to be at the Home Services Summit. We have 450 attendees, and other brands are attending as well, not just our own brands. And that's just the September 20th. So that's an annual event, and then we have other little things that happen in town halls. But at the end of the day, I don't know what's more valuable than FaceTime one-on-one with a franchise operator who's been in the business for a little while that can then share with you what's happening in the business. And I just wrote a note. I don't know why I do not, and I need to start doing this. Visit with the local franchisee whenever I travel on business. I'm always traveling to something, somewhere, and I have a tight agenda, and I need to loosen things up and
Mhm.
insert a lunch or a dinner with some franchisees in that local market so I can hear more about what's going on. I think that's
Yeah.
a huge takeaway for me. So thank you for sharing that, Sherry. I want to jump to what's working for. I know at Stellar Brands, you've got Restoration One, which is restoration. You've got Blue Frog Plumbing and Drain, which is drain, and then you've got Soft Rock.
Yep.
That's right, which does driveways.
Yes, or any, they do an overlay on any concrete surface. So think about if you had a pool deck,
Yeah,
or in commercial settings, it could be a playground or a locker room.
great. So three different brands. One, Restoration is highly regulated by insurance and payments. I mean, maybe you have some private pay customers. I don't know, but I imagine a lot of this has to do with using Exactimate or something like that, and you have to kind of comply to certain rules and get paid so much money per dryer or whatever it is, or per fan. And then you've got Blue Frog, which is highly regulated. You need to be a plumber, and you've got to be you know I guess what do you call that? Not degreed, but you have to be stamped, I guess, or
Licensed.
licensed. Yeah, which
A
is a lengthy
licensed.
process for
Yes.
most plumbers. Very different than restoration, but I think they play nicely together, don't they? Don't these two businesses often work together? And,
Yeah, at
and
the marketing level, they're fabulous together. It really
okay,
is. A lot of our franchisees on the restoration side got their jump up when they opened by um, building strong relationships with their local plumbers. Plumbers typically get the first water call. So
yeah.
something's broken, leaking, molding, et cetera. And if our franchisees over the years have found that if they can have really strong relationships, they can be the second phone call from the plumber.
So they play really nicely.
Hmm.
Layering like soft rock, very different than these two other businesses. So if you wouldn't mind, I got really two questions for you to help all of our listeners. One would be, do you have franchisees from Restoration One buying Soft Rock and buying Blue Frog, or vice versa, Blue Frog buying these other ones? So that question is always in my mind. Should I be encouraging, or should franchisors who own more than one brand encourage franchisees to buy the other brand they own? Is probably the first question I would have for you. And then second, if you look at those three brands, which of them are growing the fastest, and what's working really well for in terms of growing those brands?
Um, that is, especially when you have a platform with multiple brands on it, that's always the Fran Dev rationale, right? Franchise development rationale is if I have multiple brands, I should be able to cross sell to the franchisees. I think that works depending on the franchisee. We have a few franchisees that own within our network, that own something else within the network.
Okay.
The challenge that they have is that the business models are different
Mm-hmm.
and the labor does not go across. So, my biggest piece of advice or caution, as I think, when we talk to prospects in franchise development, I mean, there are incredible buyers out there that are specifically wanting to build their own platforms on a smaller scale.
Sure. Yeah.
And so we just had a PE group come in and buy into our top franchise owner in restoration in the Northwest. And they are building a platform and they have the infrastructure for it.
Mm-hmm.
So that the single owner going across isn't struggling. I mean, labor is the number one thing we hear. I'm sure everyone is hearing and
Yeah.
has heard for a while. And I don't think it's going to stop for a while. And so in my case, we've got 3 different companies that have 3 different labor targets. And so if I'm going to be an owner, it's going to own Restoration One, Blue Frog Plumbing, and Soft Rock, I'm going to need 3 leaders who can manage the day-to-day in each of those, everything from the labor challenge to the fact that the business models are different.
Yeah.
Now, I've got wonderful cases where a restoration owner and a Blue Frog Plumbing and Drain owner happen to be in the same market, and they have figured out really creative ways to help each other's business. All the way to one example where they've gotten so creative that they're in the same building, side by side storefronts.
Oh, really?
But to the marketplace, they're owned by 2.
Yeah.
But that proximity has been very beneficial for them behind those front doors, as they're dispatching jobs or getting phone calls, et cetera.
Interesting.
And so, as a franchisor, we've not spent a lot of time. We're so young as a network. I really haven't spent time figuring out how to create the solution on how to package this. But we do have franchisees out there that are working on that in their own business.
Do you when you have convention, do you have your convention separately for each brand? Or are they all under one Stellar Brands convention?
For the last 2 years have been our first main ones. Before that, when I first came in, we did regional meetings for Restoration One because COVID, everyone was so nervous about being together. But Tom Geiser, who runs Restoration One, and I were very determined that people would get back together because the community needs it.
Yeah.
Otherwise you forget and you start to think I'm an independent operator.
Yeah.
And the fact is the power of this is in the community. So the last 2 have been together. Now, a service master lesson was, I used to chair, I don't know why, but I used to chair the convention, and it was a huge, huge thing.
Oh, ton of work.
I just love the whole dynamic of it, which is super crazy. But so I would chair it. And we thought one year we put everybody together and we thought everybody would really dig it. And what the lesson was is that franchisees only care about their brand.
Yeah, I know.
Note to self.
Uh-huh.
They actually don't care about Stellar. They didn't care about Service Master. They didn't want to sit and hear about the biggest brand that sucked up all the oxygen, anyway. Yeah. And so we had to become very careful with making sure that the Merry Maid franchisee, the Furniture Medic franchisee had just as good of an experience as the big gorilla Service Master Restore and Clean. So I've taken that into our convention here. We do have some of our time where it's everyone. And really what we did, I just want everybody to see the awards. Mm-hmm. I want everybody to know who the winners are. And so we do awards together. Mm-hmm. And then the rest of the time, other than vendor and meals we have together, the rest of the time is in their own brands because frankly, that's their main priority, their brand.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah. So what do you do when you have someone that's got 2 brands? Like they own a Blue Frog and a restoration. They come to convention. How do they split their time?
They have to split their time and they
Yeah,
bring people with them.
they bring people
Yeah.
in. Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Because if you're doing that, you typically have a GM.
Yeah,
And that you have to divide and conquer.
yeah. So,
And
so
we
you'd
we
say,
recommend that in general.
so it sounds like you would say that, in some cases you do encourage franchisees to own a Restoration One and a Blue Frog because it's very complementary and it's working. But another note is that the franchisee only cares about the brands they own. That's it. When you're doing convention, that's quite. I can understand that. We're actually for the first time bringing all of our brands together this September. Now we've done independent conferences until this point. We've been very careful to make sure there's content that's very specific for days, a couple days, that's to just their brand, and then we have content that is specific to home services,
Mhm.
running a P&L, finding labor. In fact, let's talk about labor in a minute here. New marketing sources, financing options. And so you can kind of pick from a plethora of options that apply to any brand. But so we'll see. I'll report back on how that goes. I know it'll be a learning experience. Um, let's talk about labor for a second because it is an issue, and I've had a number of people on the show who have talked about labor being a problem. I'm curious to know how do you think about solving that or helping your franchisees solve that? Do you get involved? Do you give them tips and tricks? Do you actually do some recruiting? Do you have employees at your organization that are helping franchisees find people? How do you approach that?
It's a fine line. I mean, legally, it's a very fine line as a franchisor about how far we can get directly involved. And, uh, we've fostered, in this environment where you're fostering people sharing and solving problems,
Mm-hmm.
you also you're indirectly fostering some independence. And so I tend to be very careful to maintain a franchisee's independence, even in the pressure of labor.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, we have been reinforcing quite a few things. One has been culture. I've been very vocal, and it's been in different places in the organization. Today, if you're out there trying to attract talent, you have to have a culture that is appealing and will retain them. If you don't, like, you can drag people in as much as you want, but you're going to lose them eventually. So culture is really important. And I think for business owners like our franchisees who are starting out, et cetera, learning as they're firefighting and trying to build their business, that they have to be communicating to their staff and doing all these things. It's like juggling 5 different things at one time. And so culture is really huge. We do give tools, templates, examples. We do provide vendor opportunities
Okay.
for, like, Career Plug as an example, different vendors that can help.
Yeah.
And then we allow time for franchisees to share what's working.
That is all. I think those are all pretty standard answers and carefully thought through because the liability issue is always a problem. I'll bring this up because it blew me away when someone brought it up at an interview I had a while ago. Monster Tree actually had a internal team of recruiters hired on staff that would call and recruit labor, direct labor, the laborers of that concept, to recruit them for the franchisees, including phone calling, outreach. And I asked the question, well, what about this whole all the joint employer issues? And he said, it doesn't matter. We decided that the amount of revenue we would generate by adding more people was so substantial that this was the largest problem our franchisees faced, that if we could solve this problem, it would result in so much more revenue for our franchisees. We were comfortable with the risk. And I've thought about that a few times. Would I go
Yeah.
so far as doing that? And we've not. To this date, similar to you, we spend time, franchisees talking about how to do it. Here's your tools, having vendors there that are available. But we have yet to get into the recruiting business, although we may have to do that at some point. Because I think you are right. I think labor will continue to be a problem in our industry, and that's why I'm in it. Frankly, AI is not replacing our responsibilities yet, not for the next, hopefully next 20 or 30 years. And so as long as that's happening,
I'd love to see AI fix a toilet, honestly.
yeah,
Like let's have AI fix a toilet.
there's
Come on.
there are bigger fish to fry and problems to fix
Mm-hmm.
than that for now. And so that's interesting. Uh, I got a few more questions for you. We've reached this point where if anyone in the audience who is listening live feels like they'd like to ask a question, feel free to load that into the chat, and I'll make sure that I ask Sherry those questions for you. So if you don't mind, Sherry, maybe just talk to us a little bit about the structure of Stellar. You're the CEO of the platform, and you were the COO for years of the platform prior to becoming the CEO. Do you have brand presidents that run each brand? Do you have shared services at the corporate level? And if so, like maybe just talk us through how you decided to organize the business.
We really used the kind of IFA list of ranking of kind of importance all the way down. And we peeled off operations and training.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what sits in the brand underneath the brand president and with that staff.
Okay.
So network, satisfaction, training, operations, right? That's everything you need. That's what you're selling, right?
Yep.
And then the rest we put on the platform itself, and brands take a share of it. So
Yep.
franchise development sits on the platform, as does the support services. So finance, legal, sourcing as
Yep.
examples. And that way, my small brands can take their share versus being weighted with, their marketing, a full marketing person, when in fact, the brand really only needs a half marketing person.
Right.
So that's how we've done it. Brand presidents run their FCs, and then of course are deeply involved in strategic planning, et cetera. My people philosophy is I keep my staff. I'm a person that likes agility.
Mm-hmm.
And so I prefer less staff, wider responsibility. So my first strategic hire after I became CEO, the PE group came to me and said, this is the time we would love to see an investment in a CFO. And in my experience was like, whoa, we're too small. Like I don't need a CFO that's going to like have 3 days worth of work and then give me the list of all the things that need to be fixed. And then, they're sitting back there drinking a scotch.
Uh-huh.
If I can get a CFO that can be broad,
Yeah.
like understands technology and data, does that even exist? And then I found Providence, Jessica Westcott, brought her in as CFO, COO, and she has been, again, that broad, she's been an accelerator, and a huge accelerator. So instead of having like 3 people sitting in roles, she's overseeing legal, technology, and finance. And and her skill set is perfectly set for that. I oversee the Fran Dev marketing and operations group.
Mm-hmm.
That's all we need on the C level. And then, off we go with our rest of our team. And then we use fall strategic planning to really set our strategic priorities. Last year was our first, and it was super painful. But I'll tell you what, I've learned so much this year that to go faster, sometimes you have to slow down. Yeah. And you focus on less, not more, to stop being so frenetic, because your franchisees can only absorb so much.
Right.
And it's been an incredible learning year around the power of that. So, I love the challenge of teams and talent. You talk about the hiring challenge for franchisees. I think we're all in the fight for excellent talent.
Yeah. There's no question at every level in every organization, you always need the right people. I want to dig into the marketing side of how you organize things, and this is selfish because we have brand managers at every one of our brands, and they report up to a CMO, a brand leadership team that's a shared services. But I always find that in my experience in 19 years of franchising, one of the more contentious areas is always marketing. And so I'm curious, do you have brand leaders or marketers at each brand? If you do, who do they report to? Just kind of unpack that for us a little bit? How do you manage that?
I'm probably gonna have to take notes from you. I used to laugh at Mary Maids. It was like I didn't realize everyone was a marketer. You're just like, oh God, like I'm not even a real marketer. Like I'm just trying to figure out how to get leads, and everybody's got an opinion about a color or about like you're
Yeah.
just like, oh my gosh, it gets so confusing. Our brands are it's very limited on marketing. We're focused on the digital marketing side
Yeah.
because that's a lot of the investment that we do. And so we lean hard into our vendors. My Jessica, who's the CFO, COO, has tons of experience in digital marketing because of the data element of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And so we have a really strong person that sits on that side of the business with Jessica, and I have a fractional CMO that I've engaged with for about a year.
Hmm.
I just felt like at the stage we're at and at the size of our ad funds, to have a full-time CMO, I would have a very frustrated person and it would add to frustration about marketing across. And so I'm using a fractional CMO to help us think through branding, differentiators, um, how we align with strategy.
Yeah.
And then, of course, on the Fran Dev side, that's a whole nother marketing channel,
Yeah.
right? How do I
Absolutely.
go out and find the people who are in the market to buy a business? And I don't want to sound like everybody else. I want to be different.
Hmm.
So I have her focused there. And then I have just very tactical support at the franchise level, helping them see where they go to get their resources. I
Right.
mean,
Okay.
it's really very stripped down. I think as our ad funds grow, I'm going to have to, I'll be in a position where it'll be time to bring in a CMO and build that out. But I don't think I'm there yet.
Well, I think there's a great learning there. That is, we can see that where the business is going to be at some point, and you may not be in a position where you can afford a full-time CFO or a full-time CMO. But in today's world, there are so many people who will operate as fractional CMOs, CFOs. There's really, frankly, a lot of, in every city, major city, there's whole organizations dedicated to that kind of a task. And so if your business is at a place where you can't afford a full-time person, uh, think about leveraging a fractional CMO that is got, that's there regularly, 1 day a week or 2 days a week. You're only paying for that portion of their time, but you get the
Mhm.
expertise for the big things, and they can add a lot of value in the organization. So that's a good takeaway for everyone on this call.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got kind of my final question I like to ask people, and it kind of drives down to, as a leader, when you're running an organization, there's just endless information and data that we're pulling in constantly, and it's really hard to make sure you're looking at the right things and the team are looking at the right things. And so here's the question I ask. I'd love to get your thoughts on this. Imagine you're stranded on a desert island and you only get a bottle a day that has a message in it with information on your business. And it contains 4 pieces of data for you to share with you. Your KPIs. What are the 4 things you need to be looking at every day to know the business is on track and it's going the right direction?
Um, I I love top and bottom. So I want to know the top number and I want the bottom number because I like to know what's actually flowing through. So, I feel like, at the end of the day, if you don't have enough top, you're not going to have anything at the bottom. And
Yeah.
then if you have top, I just want to make sure I want to see what's going to the bottom. And then, of course, if I had another bottle that was showing up, then I would just look at all the in betweens. But if I had to just see, like, of my two, I would say I would I would just know. I'd love to know the top, and then I would love to know the bottom, so I could get a sense of flow through. Um, I would want to know my staff number because we're constantly talking about staff. So I just want to know how many people are still working. Like, did I start with 20 and today I'm still at 20? And maybe the sentiment, like a smiley face or, like something
Yeah.
super simple, like, am I, am I neutral or am I negative? Like I've got people leaving and I need to think about
Uh-huh.
that.
Uh-huh.
And then probably the third is even in the short term that we've had Bird Eye turned on, hearing customer
Hmm.
sentiment's the bottom of the bottom of the barrel there, but I don't want to hear that. Sentiment I don't know what the number would be, but I think I would want to know the impact we're having across in the consumer population. So I would do top and bottom. I would do my staff count, and I would do customer sentiment.
I think those are great takeaways and good ones to end on. And I just want to throw in, add my voice to this conversation. I think so often as leaders, we want to know customer voice, right? And so opinion or customer or reputation. We use a company called Opinion. That's why it slipped out. That measures how happy our customers are with our franchisees. I think that there's no question you have to know that. The next would be, franchisee sentiment. How happy are they? Obviously, they're our customer. It's complicated as a franchisor. You have to know your how your franchisees are doing, how their customers are doing, and then one that is less measured often, I find in organizations, but you mentioned is, smiley face, neutral, or not happy face. Just give me one of those three. How happy are your team members at working at your company? And I don't know. I do know that for myself, we don't measure that well enough at our own business. We're not asking those questions at least annually if we should. And as a business grows and expands, it's not just a lunch once a week with your team members. It really requires asking them questions. We have done what we call 360 reviews, where we allow and permit everyone in the organization, from the bottom to the top, each level, they are rating their boss, and they're providing feedback on what that person is doing well and what they're not doing well, from the bottom to the top. So each level, it stacks up, and then it comes to our executive team as a review, and we spend time looking at that. We've done that a few times, let's say 3 or 4 over the last couple of years, and I find that is very, very valuable. So if you're not doing that, consider doing it. Well, this has been special, Sherry. Thank you so much for joining us, and I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom. It's great to meet you over a video call, and we hope to see you sometime soon at the next franchising event, IFA or something.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So much fun.
Awesome. Thanks, Sherry.
Hey everyone, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and more importantly, that it brings some value in building your home services business. If you'd like to access more of this amazing content, like and subscribe below. If you'd like to be part of our live recordings and get involved with the speakers and myself, click the subscribe to calendar button or the link in the description to get updates to future events.